All right, welcome back, everyone, to episode 2 of the Heat and Light podcast. This is Marc Sessler, joined, as always, well, really only the second time, I guess it's still always, by Conor Orr.
What's up, buddy?
How you doing?
I'm doing well. I'm getting ready for the weekend, gearing up.
We like to do this on Friday because once we wrap this up, we can kind of coast through a rather brain-dead last few hours on the shift in the newsroom and kind of snow under our employer on that front. And then it's the weekend. Then we start to imbibe liquors. We start to be out in the sun. So that's fun. I know, Conor, this week we're really thankful for everyone that listened to the show last time. The reaction, I would say, it was mixed. Would you agree?
Yeah, I think probably a little bit of confusion, which we were sort of going for anyway, but also some really nice suggestions. So it was all appreciated.
Yeah, and some pointed suggestions. So keep them coming. I think for me this week, there were not a lot going on in the football world, but the big kind of event was that the New York Jets made it crystal clear that they are in tank job central in the AFC East, that they are not going to just be happy going 4-12. They are looking to potentially run the table in the opposite way, go 0-16. This is a team that has chopped over the last 18 months names like Nick Mangold, DeBrickashaw Ferguson, Revis, Antonio Cromartie, and this week David Harris and wide receiver Eric Decker. Conor, we have sort of looked around the sports world to try to find a tank job of equal measure, and I think you came up with one.
Yeah, I had to look back to the 2012 Olympics between China and South Korea in women's doubles badminton. And for those who don't know the story, basically both teams went in not wanting to win because they would have to play a better Chinese team in the next round. And if you lost, you got to play, I believe it was the Dutch who were not as prolific at badminton. And so what ensued was sort of this crazy thing in front of this packed stadium where all these people were just watching these four women just hit the birdie right into the net or just give up completely and just trudge around until they were threatened with expulsion, which is one of the most amazing things I think I've ever seen before.
Yeah, I got to work today, again, dodging actual work responsibilities, watched the full run of this match. And, people can make fun of badminton, but the birdies, like in these real matches, if people are actually trying, it can go up to 200 miles an hour, which is like 50 miles per hour more than like an excellent pro tennis player. So instead, when people have flown all the way to London, you're spending thousands in cash on hotels, meals, drinks to watch premier athletes go at it. And this, like you said, this packed stadium is watching these four women just slightly volley the birdie right into the net, or if it's coming at them, just moving out of the way and watching it hit the ground, to the point where like multiple umpires had to come out of the woodwork to say, ladies, please try. This is ridiculous. And at the end of it, it really was an incredible spectacle at the end. As the matches ended, it's clearly both teams are heading for disqualification. They grab their bags, their equipment, and they quickly give each other high fives, these two opposing teams. And the crowd is going ballistic, raining down boos and hatred on what they've seen. I really can't think of too many other sporting events like it.
You think you picture the Jets general manager in his office watching this being like, yes, this is what we need to do. But
this is the master plan in Florham Park, yes.
But one of the things that I love the most about it, and this would never happen in football here, that I don't think the Jets would ever get called out to this level, nor do I think it would ever get to that point, because they do have some young players that I think will make it at least semi-interesting during some of these games. But the British announcer was so pointed and so passionate about badminton that his assessment of it was just brutal. And he was just saying, this is the most disgusting thing I've ever seen. What a horrible, dark day for sport. And just really just making these people feel so bad that I heard an interview with one of the South Korean players, I believe it was, afterwards. It said that her parents came to the hotel afterwards, like, what the hell? And she couldn't even talk to her parents. She was so distraught about this whole thing. So maybe on the tanking scale, that's where you get your 10 out of 10. I would say the Jets are probably at a 4.5. But man, look out! I mean, if they start if they get rid of like Muhammad Wilkerson, this might be getting in that direction. And it's interesting that we're kind of talking about this hidden sort of deviousness at the top, and sticking to the formation of our show, the format. I want to ask you a question that kind of popped in my head during a long drive yesterday. I'd watched a really bad superhero movie where the CEOs at the top of this dark cloud corporation are sitting there and they're just laying out their evil plan, right? They're talking about how they're going to steal stuff from people and how it's going to all seem totally above board, but how evil it is. And so I'm wondering, do you think that this really goes on? So are big corporations really evil, or do you think that they just appear evil to us because they're so big? And sometimes when you feel helpless, maybe when you're on the phone or trying to return something, or they're charging you too much money for something.
Yeah, I mean, it's a formless evil. I do think that corporations in general they're an easy target because what is there to like about the idea of a big, powerful company, joining with another big, powerful company, some monopoly being created, and CEOs in general? I mean, before working for the NFL, I had a string of terrible jobs working for some truly soul-deadening corporations where you look at the CEO. One of them, I was working for a company where I was a proposal writer, and I was a couple weeks in and realized, because this company was shrouded in mystery, but it paid okay. And I got in there and realized that my job was to create proposals that were doing very nefarious things in the Middle East, basically. And I said, I'm out. But even like less on the nose, evil type companies, these CEOs, they're much richer than you. For me, they're typically like a lot taller than me because it's always like this alpha male dude that's like, hey, I'm 52 and I'm still doing like mud runs and stuff. And they're driving around in like cream colored Porsches. That's just a totally unlikable character. Are they inherently evil? I kind of think that what they're after is typically money and power and prestige. And they see some of the ones I've interacted with seem to really get off on that kind of stuff, which I found really suspicious. So they're not easy to like. I'm not going to walk around saying, hey guys, big corporations are wonderful. Let's start to look at it that way.
I wonder though, like kind of circling back to the like part of the initial question, which was
the question I did not answer
at all, is the conversation, right? So at your old company, is the guy at the top being like, okay, today's board meeting is about some really below board stuff that we're going to do in a part of the country that a whole bunch of people don't pay attention to? Or is he even kind of unknowing about what he's stumbling into and he's just doing things that make sense, and then all of a sudden you wake up 5 years later and you've pillaged some place and done a bunch of horrible things to people? I wonder if there is that actual conversation that takes place. Like, yeah, we're going to put this hidden charge in everyone's cable bill, and by 2020, we're going to have enough money to buy our own island and siphon off the profits. Does that conversation actually physically take place?
Well, I don't know how. I think it must on some level. I don't think it's in front of a large boardroom. Deep secrets and dark plots have to happen between a small amount of people. I think of listening to like the LBJ White House tapes or plenty of the Nixon ones, for instance. There was some incredibly crazy, evil stuff happening on those phone calls. And it would be LBJ at 1:15 a.m. in the White House, sauced up on bourbon, talking to like one trusted source about what they were going to do in Vietnam. And it's like, the plan has to hatch somewhere for the cable bill secret charge to get into the cable bill. Person A and person B must know about it.
I agree. And quickly, where would you have your nefarious conversation if you're the CEO? Because you can't do it in an office. I mean, these places are all bugged. You're seeing how all this stuff goes down now. People are making tapes and memos, and there's all these foot trails. Where is your place to have the evil conversation?
I think for me, I always think of the scene in the movie where there's I'd be in some sort of ridiculous town car, deep in the night out by some dock or port where there's no one around. I'm in this large abandoned parking lot. There's some distant lamp on somewhere. And if the person's with me in the car, it's probably a very Vince Foster-like situation. It's the very dark orders that are untraceable. Or maybe I'm on some unmarked phone but it would be in the middle of the night, very evil, very very dark circumstances.
I think I would go personally like sort of a Ferris wheel or roller coaster, but much in the style of like a '60s businessman, like be in a charcoal suit with my hair perfectly parted, and I'd also be smoking on the roller coaster while I'm revealing this information to an employee whose life is about to change in a major way. And you balance that against my calmness, my ability to somehow smoke on this 200-mile-an-hour roller coaster, and then this guy sitting next to me that's taking in all the lights and the dips, but also realizing that like we're about to dig out an entire portion of the Pacific Ocean for our own gain, and somehow do something, reroute the paths of thousands, hundreds of millions of animals.
I mean, I'm finding out that I'm into the second episode of a show with someone. It would be far too easy for you to be evil. I cannot believe the picture you just painted. I think, though, our next topic is something that we've talked about this over beers. We've talked about it many, many times at work over our chat client. And I know it's a passion project of yours. I find I'm starting to get pulled into the web. But why don't you let us know where you're at with this whole Paul McCartney scenario?
So can I just say, when this started, I was probably like 12 or 13, and I just started listening to the Beatles, and nobody had told me about this. This was something that I sort of stumbled upon back in the days of America Online, where you had to dial up, and all these, even when a normal web page loaded, it looked very scary because you only saw it in little clips, like kind of coming together,
right?
Pixels coming together. And so when I discovered all this information about Paul McCartney actually dying in a car crash in the late '60s, it blew my mind. And then it was accompanied by this clip where they were playing a bunch of songs backwards, and you would hear like, "Paul is a dead man, miss him, miss him, miss him." And then, like I'm just there, I'm like checking the house for ghosts or like the government. I'm totally freaked out at what I'm digesting at that moment. And now that, it's funny, 15 years later, 16 years later, I'm still into it. I saw him for the first time last year at MetLife Stadium, and the whole time I'm just shaking my head like, I don't know who you are. And I was just hoping he'd address it in front of everybody.
It is. He has mentioned it before. I saw a clip of him talking about it on the David Letterman show. Of all days, it was September 11th, 1966, when, according to some, that Paul McCartney, on a rainy night, after being forced by a studio exec to go out and author a series of songs before John Lennon got back from some trip he was on, that McCartney, in a huff, took off in a white Aston Martin and apparently picked up a hitchhiker, a female hitchhiker, who they were driving together, and she began to realize, oh my gosh, this is Paul McCartney. And she really became emotional, and it distracted him, and he went right through a red light, according to this theory, and was decapitated. And the Beatles, being what they were, they said, no, we need to find a way to keep the Beatles going. And they apparently found someone by the name of William Shepard, who got the nickname not Paul but Fall, to some of these theorists, that he looked so much like Paul McCartney that he was able to sing, and he was able to do everything that you'd ask Paul McCartney to do. But when they put studies of their faces together, now some of this is where it gets a little mind-bending for me, but they showed great discrepancies in the young Paul and the Paul that we've come to know since that date, according to some.
Different ear shapes, different teeth imprints, different nose shapes. Like they sort of laid out the facial structures and all that kind of stuff. And I guess your body, depending on where you live and what you do to it, could go in a million different directions. But I just think that they left behind so many clues that this can't be just a coincidence. I mean, you look at the cover of Abbey Road where he's in the funeral garb, or the cover of Sgt. Pepper where there's the palm over his head, and Billy Shepard, who is he Billy Shears? I don't know, and the license plate. It's so deep, and that's what I think really adds to the legend and adds to the whole fun about it, because you can just sit there and listen to Revolution Number 9 alone in your dark house and just freak yourself out. Just totally force yourself to lock all the doors and just wonder if there's just everything we know is not true.
It really is a wormhole. And I was digging into, these old records would come with these amazing booklets. And there was the Magical Mystery Tour record booklet that inside of it, there's all this bizarre language where it talks about the band having, in quotes, 4 or 5 magicians. And there's another instance where in that same booklet, there's a picture of Paul McCartney, according to the pre-car crash Paul McCartney, with the words, "I was," under him. There's a later thing. There's the drum, I believe, on one sort of cover art. It says "Love the 3 Beatles." It goes on and on. There's imagery where there's the 4 Beatles together, and they're all wearing red carnations except Paul, who has a black carnation. And he was asked about that at one point, and what he said was, well, they ran out of red carnations for this music video or the shoot. It's like 2 things. A, how would you ever say, we're going to do something with the Beatles, let's get 3 of these flowers? And if you ran out, a black carnation is not easy to produce. They're not any more common. Like, why did you suddenly get a black carnation as the answer to running out of red ones? And there's this other crazy image of, on one of their album art, where there's 4 candles, and they're all lit, burning with fire, except one that has been blown out with smoke wafting into the night. So I think if anything, I think they caught, if you want to say all of this is bunk, but the Beatles were, they did enough to have some fun with it, where they knew these rumors were out there, and they would maybe go through the trouble of creating album art, creating lyrics backwards that would only add to this incredible mystery.
Yeah, it's like Pink Floyd not wanting to have anything to do with Dark Side of the Moon syncing up with The Wizard of Oz. It's
right.
Like yes it does. I mean, and there's nothing that you can do to stop that or control it, and you totally did that on purpose. And yeah, if they didn't know, or if Paul is still alive and they're just generally aware of everything that's been going on, I would probably do that. If you're in the band, you're like, this is hilarious. People think that this guy's dead. Let's find these deep ways to sort of layer in death clues in all of our songs. So that to me sort of adds to their genius. They're already the greatest musical act in the history of the world, and then they're also layering in secret death theories about their lead singer. It's fantastic.
I mean, that you have reached the absolute upper echelons of fame. We talked about these CEOs. CEOs are not famous. They are boring, and they are typically unlikable. But when you are out there and people are creating theories about the fact that you died 5 years ago or something, that you are a subject of fascination that is beyond belief. And like with Paul McCartney and the Beatles, it's the fact that we kind of lost John Lennon at one point, and the band, certainly had everyone lived, you could have seen the Beatles going on, if they were able to get along, for a much longer had they wanted to, or reunite when they realized they got over their troubles. But because the band got cut off when it did, something like this only just endures, except for the fact that Paul McCartney, I mean, honestly, like when I look at most of these photos, he looks exactly like the young Paul. I mean, it's a theory that's an amazing wormhole, but then I get stopped up by the fact that, wait a minute, really?
Well, I don't know. I think the one clue to me is not on any of these sites. It's on this YouTube video where Paul and George and Ringo were together for a brief moment in time in the mid-90s. I think it was as an extra for one of the anthologies that came out, and they played a couple songs together, and George Harrison could not want to get out of there any faster, and he was just looking over, and they were saying like, oh, let's play like Blue Moon, and he's like, all right, once, quickly, and then like, because he's probably like, get me out of this room with this goober that's not the guy that I don't know. This might have been the 3rd Paul McCartney by then, and it probably freaked him out a little bit.
Interesting.
That's why George developed such a spirituality about him. He had to get rid of this energy. This is he's been chased by ghosts for his entire life. And that one conspiracy site said that there's been like 5 Paul McCartneys. So
well, I mean, if there's been 2, why not up the number to as many as we can at that point? I think this is a topic, not next week, but maybe we do a little bit more digging on this, and we come back to this topic down the road, because I think it's a kind of thing that we've just scratched the surface on, and I think we're kind of running out of time here, because we have an editor, Austin Knobloch, back at the desk that it was roughly an hour ago. We ran into some tech issues with the show. We said we'll be back in 15 minutes. Got some important stuff to do. He was very nice about that, and it's 60, 70 minutes later, and we are totally AWOL, Connor.
Yeah, I'm in a car on my way to New York City. I'm not coming back. So if you could just explain to him that's what we're doing. Just kidding, Austin. I'll be back in 5 minutes.
We have been highly unreliable. We should get back, and we'll be back next week with another episode of this, episode 3. We have no idea. We don't. When did we come up with the show? It's like this morning. I think I texted you some ideas. You texted me some. It's very loose. And if you don't like that, go listen to something else.
Yeah, go listen to the. I don't know. Go listen to a shopping podcast, you jerks.
Please do. Get out of our face. All right, we'll see you next week.